Hello and welcome to this screen record video or audio of building a case for using ChatGPT for bipolar creativity and ideas. So the purpose of this is multifaceted. A little bit of background. I was recently in a depression and now I'm starting to come out of it, and I'm getting my executive functioning back, like planning, motivation, things like that. And so I find myself quite curious about what I was up to when I was in a hypomania for a number of months before the depression started. And the reason I'm able to do this is because I have a practice of keeping track of a lot of the inspired ideas or creative possibilities that come to mind. And right now I'm in a unique position where I can pretty much immediately go back and have a look at it. And the reason it's a unique position is because I haven't had a depression for 5 years. And when I had that depression, I had creative insights and things, but I didn't really have the practice or perspective of just like documenting them down and writing them down as much as I did after that depression. So about a year after my last depression, not this one that just is finishing, I had a big creative wave where I wrote out 700 pages that turned into a book. And I've had a lot of different creative ideas and projects on the go since then for about 4 years. So that was like a 4 or 5 year period of time where I was able to be quite creative and actualize some projects, like writing a book, for example. And then after writing the book, I still had other creative ideas and I was working on different projects. And having the depression happen for about 2.5 to 3 months, it was basically like erasing everything, erasing my executive function. All I could do really was just get to the couch and watch YouTube, and it wasn't even enjoyable because I didn't really have the dopamine to get any kind of enjoyment out of it. Not only that, I gravitated towards negative things, which isn't enjoyable anyway. So now that I'm coming through it right away, the first thing that I seem to be motivated to be interested in is have a look at some of what I've been up to, because I totally forgot. Like, it's like wiping the slate clean. And had I not documented it well in certain apps that I'm just naturally going to use anyway, it might have just gotten lost in everything in life. And that's okay too. It's just not what I've been doing. It's the thing with bipolar is, honestly, I don't even personally know that many people with bipolar. So I can't say like, oh, we're all very similar or we're all really different. I think we're each unique people and humans. And so what I say about my experience may or may not be exactly the same in detail or even generally speaking, but some of it might. And in my experience, like, we haven't really opened this conversation about a lot of the different aspects that are part of it that are beneficial. And, we know creativity is one of those things, which could vary from person to person and levels of energy that one experiences, or, whether it's mania or hypomania. And putting aside that mania can be detrimental in a lot of ways. Like, how can one look at the good parts? And when is a good time to do that? So now that I've had my first major depression, prolonged, totally non-functional depression in 5 years, and I before that was being creative for like 4 years straight, nonstop, and still doing other things that I have to do. And that was easier because I created a creative process that didn't interfere with my daily functioning. Instead of having like just major creativity to the detriment of everything else, I was able to do it all kind of for a while. And I ended up in depression. That's another story. I know why it happened. And what I'm seeing now is it's actually kind of interesting to be like, okay, I had the slate wiped clean, but I still have all my slates. I still have everything I wrote down on sticky notes or in the computer in different apps and documents. And so part of this is to show some of what I have collected. And it came to me recently that this experience of going through some of it, like sifting and sorting through some of it, is actually a bit of a hobby. And I say that because like I could think of it as this big project or something and, you know, make it all important. And it's not really important in a lot of ways, but at the same time, like that's what makes hobbies hobbies. I once remember seeing somewhere there was this man, and his hobby was basically to collect all the information about paint colors of cars, like in a big spreadsheet and like their color code, like hashtag something or other, or what, however it was formatted. And this person, they got really a lot of joy out of that. And so, you know, if I think about how somebody can have a hobby collecting paint color information to the point where maybe this person, even when they look at the color code, they can visualize the color. You know, I would assume there would be some kind of like memorization and experience there rather than, and maybe even picture the type of car that might have that color, because certain brands have certain colors and maybe some of them overlap. And then there's cars and brands that eventually they don't exist anymore. And, you know, so he had that. And I'm going to see my collection of ideas and insights as that sort of thing. It's more of a hobby than a project, though it could turn into a project. So we're going to just kind of like experiment to see how this turns out, because I've been looking for a process to get back into speaking out loud, basically. It's sort of an excuse to speak out loud. And I've probably since writing the book I wrote, I got into a place of writing everything down for the purpose of maybe writing one day. And the thing is that I wrote a book and that was very challenging, and it's kind of very slow. And some people might say, well, write blog posts or Substack posts or write on X. And I just find it kind of slow, and it's a certain dimension of just sort of like ideating and trying to make it into something, quote, persuasive, I guess, is what they say you need to do. And like fundamentally, I'm not trying to persuade anybody. It's more like a hobby, you know, like the person who has the spreadsheet of paint colors isn't trying to persuade other people that they should have this hobby, or convince people how important paint colors are, or go around all day long taking pictures of cars with that color and posting it. And, you know, maybe they do that. But what I'm trying to say is when it's a hobby, it's more like for fun and not as much for like, okay, now I got to turn this into some kind of argument, you know, because an argument is from a certain state of mind where, say, I'm taking a position on something. And in my experience and in my view, the reason why these insights or ideas have come to my mind is because in the state of mania, or sometimes I like to think of it more now just the state of energy, having energy, these insights come to mind and I can perceive them. And I don't really see them or hear them. They're just sort of there as a perception, and then I write them down. And so when I have more energy, that happens more often. And that's one of the benefits of now just coming out of a depression as well, and being able to look at some of these insights and hobby ideas, is that if I was in an energetic state still, it would just expand. So I would read the insight and I'd have another insight, or things like that. I don't even have time to read the insights because I'm having insights and then living. So I find myself being somewhat of an idea originator. And this is one of the roles that I created when I did a brainstorm of a bunch of different roles that might be played in the future that we likely need to create ourselves. And when I was was taking out some extra like boxes and things like that, when I started to feel better a couple weeks ago, all the roles that I brainstormed, there was like 152, were in a spreadsheet that was like 5 columns. And when I went to take out one of the boxes, and I had cut some of them up like into bits to have them separate, and when I picked up one of the boxes, all of a sudden the role of idea originator on this small piece of paper printed out was there. And so I see myself as an idea originator. I don't think I think up the ideas, though how my consciousness has developed over time likely influences what exactly comes through. And a lot of what comes through is regarding the benefits of the state in which these ideas come through in. And see, I need to exercise my voice. I haven't been really talking in quite a few years. And so, in the state of energy, it's sort of talking about the value of that state, or what can be seen from that state, visions of possibilities of the future, or how things can be better. There's a lot of different stuff. And I will say, the stuff that came through in my last crescendo of energy, which was probably through May, June, July, August, I don't think there was anything that new. So I'm wondering myself if it's kind of dried up, or like what else is there to really channel through. And then if I extrapolate that, or sort of pivot to how now there's this AI, this chat GPT and things like that, it's almost like, well, why do I even need to think of those things or have them come to mind, right? Now there's something that I can just maybe chat with and it'll say something, or now I can talk about the ideas or turn them into something, rather than just having more and more. Like with AI, it's almost like now I need to ask the channel that comes through to me, okay, please just say something that is only very relevant and new, and takes into account the evolution of everything that's happening in the world. Because, I don't need ones that are about me, or there's so many things. So anyways, so why did I say building case for using ChatGPT? Well, I'm not sure how much I'm going to use it now. This is the part of it, is that, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how to utilize it. For one, there's just so much. So if I try to go through and find piece by piece and try to stick them in order, like first I want to say this, then I want to say that, it's like impossible. So being linear or building some kind of argument is like, it doesn't inspire me. And the other thing is that, you know what? I don't even know what the other thing is, because I don't think like that. I don't think like, oh, first this and second that. It's all kind of one thing. So that's sort of the context behind it. And there could be more context behind it and I'm just going to mention it as it comes up because that's easier. So I've got a ton of creativity and ideas, and I have some ideas about parts that I would like to take out from my own creativity. And then there's another idea related to AI and ChatGPT to go with that. And so other things that have been coming to mind lately are about AI. And so I want to be able to learn to use it, have a relationship with it, and export certain things to it that apparently the human brain is probably going to lose the desire and capabilities of doing, because it will just, it's like cognition and what happens in the brain is very expensive to the body. So if there's something that can take over that, it will likely happen. So what I'm going to do is, I have these different desktops open, and I've got, let's see here, we've got Canva with YouTube, as well as, one of these boxes. What is this called? Like a Finder box. So I use Mac, and so I have the Notes app on Mac open, and Pages a couple times, as well as Chrome for ChatGPT, and I have Safari open with some tabs as well, which include Twitter. And I'll tell you, I'm not much of a social media user. I'm not really big on short form content, even though I'm just noticing now it's kind of ironic, because a lot of short form content comes through me, and those are the ideas I write down. And when I write them down, I can sense the greater context that might expand around that, but I don't have time to flesh it out, because the next insight is like ready to arrive as well. So then I don't end up, and it's impossible to end up writing out the full extrapolation of that insight. And that goes with like, I'm an idea originator, but I am not necessarily the one to like flesh them out or say which one is important and what's not. And again, none of it's necessarily important. They are ideas that came to mind, and I wrote them down to honor that this idea came to mind. And, I wouldn't write down my thoughts, like my mind chatter, which I often don't experience any of that. I write down things that is like, it appears in my mind. I did not think of it. I actually wasn't thinking anything. And then it was in my mind. So that's why I wrote them down. And then there's a lot more to that, but we'll get to it eventually. And we also have Pages. Yeah, I'm a geek. I use Pages, but I'm not a huge fan. So anyways, I will tell a bit of a story. So I was sitting by the window at a table in my place, and I was just researching a few things, and then all of a sudden there was a ton of chickadees, and I didn't know what they were called. I looked it up, in the tree outside, like tons, I would say like 20. And then all of a sudden one of them flew right at me, like at the window. And, of course there's the possibility that it just didn't know there was the window there or whatever. But it didn't feel like that, because at the moment I had had an insight into something, and then all of a sudden there were these birds. And then not too long after that, a hummingbird flew by the other window, which was right in front of me. And you could think, well, it flew at the window, but I've never seen that. I've never seen a hummingbird there, and I sit by the window a lot. So it was kind of neat. And then I looked up the symbolism of chickadees, and they're often associated with positive traits such as adaptability, fearlessness, joy, and communication in various cultural and spiritual contexts. So I thought, that's neat, It's time to fearlessly communicate and be joyful. So that is the meaning of chickadees. And, that's just one of those things where, you can create your own meaning out of it. That was meaningful to me. And I interpreted it meaningfully rather than, oh, they just saw themselves in the window and birds do sometimes fly into windows because they don't see them. But it didn't look like that. To me, it wasn't felt like that. And that is the power of meaning. So I wrote down a couple of quotes. These ones I actually came across just by opening these books to different spots that I had already marked. And I have a lot of markups in books that I may never get to. Again, it's a hobby, right? Because when I've made those markups in books, it's usually to extrapolate something to these energetic states. So this first quote is from Thomas Saz in the book, The Myth of Mental Illness. I have not read that whole book yet. This, then, is the essential communicational dilemma in which many weak or oppressed persons find themselves vis-a-vis those who are stronger or who oppress them. If they speak softly, they will not receive a hearing. If they raise their voices, literally, they will be considered impertinent. And if they raise their voices metaphorically, they will be diagnosed as insane. And that's really a great quote. I know there's a lot of critiques of that book. But at the same time, it's hard to, like for me, I love to learn from people, and there could be certain parts that don't resonate with me, but I listen for the parts that do. I listen for the parts that do resonate and expand upon my views and perspectives and meanings that make up my consciousness. And so this quote it's really interesting because there is this metaphorical voice within us. It's possible that we all have this metaphorical voice, and it could be something that comes online when we're in a space or in a place in our lives when the logic and reason we've learned our whole life, that has become our way of navigating the world, led us to a place where that it wasn't good, or it was an event that we got ourselves into, or maybe got hurt. And then from that perspective, this metaphorical voice comes through. And I think it's a way of speaking. It's an artful way of speaking. I feel like it's an important way of speaking when we're trying to find the words and to create the words and the combination and the sequence of words that points to something deeper or subtler, right? Because, we often hear, oh, things go in the direction of being more deep, or you can rise to great heights, right? But that's usually associated with say like business success or sports success. But there's also the height of words, or the subtle words of on what's on the outside that we see, right? So, for example, when I saw that the chickadees, I could say it's like they knew that I was just having a very amazing inner experience at that moment, which is kind of metaphorical. There was nobody there to say that to, but even if I did, like, that's not really something that we talk about in life, right? Though I do have friends that we talk about synchronicities and meaning and the universe, and they don't have a diagnosis. I do. But having a diagnosis doesn't delete me from those dimensions. And in ways, it augments the connection I have with those dimensions. And if I try to raise my voice and share that with other people, then I get diagnosed insane. And that's something that I might have done the very first time I had mania. It was a very spiritual experience, and then eventually got diagnosed insane for my perceptions and what it is I shared. And I didn't even share that much with people. I don't think it was that much. So that's the first quote. And I wrote down another quote that from a book that I grabbed off my shelf, which is The Power of Different. And it talks about, I think, a lot of different neurodiversity. But I was happy to see that it included bipolar disorder, and they talked about moods. Because a lot of times it's almost never in any type of human potential or neurodiverse, as it's called, information. And just a note on the word neurodiverse, it's so funny. I've been kind of using it as like, oh, maybe bipolar one day will be included in neurodiversity rather than like an illness. And then I watched a video on all these like critiques about the perspective of neurodiversity, like it's putting everything in terms of neurons. And, I think for me, I wish not to get lost in the limitations of what a word can point to. I'd rather use them in different ways than that. But I find that for a lot of things where, but I do it too, for sure, because, I say I'm critical a little bit of recovery. And that's why I created the word re-uncovery, because recovery sounds like recovering over everything, right? So it implies, well, don't think about the good or the bad that happened in a previous cycle of mania, bipolar. Just, throw that away and get back to trying to work at Starbucks or something. Of course, it's not all that, and I think it's really important, as well as re-uncovery. So we can each add something to the conversation, and I like to add what is new to me, so what my brain came up with, and not so much about the, quote, mental illness part. So there's the mental illness part, which is the diagnosis and, the system and the doctors and all of that, and the different categories of symptoms that they perceive, and they don't really have a nuanced view of it because they can't see it or experience it from the inside. So I feel like the part that I like to expand upon is the everything else other than that, and even other things than recovery or whatever else is available, because at the very least, mental health isn't on an upward swing right now. It's not good. So whatever has been happening is not working that well for a lot of people. And, even myself, I've had this label for 11 years now. And I got myself into a depression. But I'll tell you, from my experience, I'll tell you my experience. I'm not trying to say how it should be or how anyone should be. But though I was depressed and I could do next to nothing except, feed myself, which was a pain. It was painful to do. And I only showered every 4 days to a week. I really did not even want to shower. Didn't enjoy it. Didn't enjoy anything. And I can tell you, though, I didn't really suffer. I was depressed, but I wasn't really suffering. It was more like just an inconvenience and annoying that I was sort of stuck there and everything was gone that I was able to do. And that was just a fact of daily existence I was experiencing. But I was hoping and assuming that within a certain, somewhat reasonable period of time, I was going to feel better. So I didn't need to add suffering. How I would relate this is I watched a video by Rupert Spira once, and he said, "Why are you so afraid of the fear?" And he was talking about how the fear of the fear is the problem, if you want to call it a problem. So, being depressed about being depressed is what might lead to suffering. And there's other ways to suffer, I've felt physical pain in the past, things like that. So again, I'm just speaking from my experience, and I'm not saying it's always been like that, but this time it was. So the quote from this book, The Power of Different, this is the author writing and also quoting someone. So the author is Gail Saltz, and she's quoting Nasir Gehami. So she says, more to the point, Gehami says, is that people with bipolar disorder can benefit from taking a broad view of their own creativity. When patients resist medication, quote, the real issue they're having is that they think about creativity as just one thing, as this kind of flash of inspiration that happens when you're manic. And that is part of creativity. But there's another kind of creativity. He cites the work of psychoanalyst Elliot Jacques, who wrote about what he called sculpted creativity. This is not a flash of inspiration, but it's insights that over time you put together like a sculptor. And it's not something that happens all of a sudden. This durable sort of creativity depends on maintaining equilibrium over the long haul, that is, not burning out like a light bulb or losing time to severe manic and depressive episodes. So, I wasn't reading this whole book when I saw that quote. I just went to that page and picked out that quote. And, when I read, I think certain things stick out to me, which is, this part here, when he's talking about the sculpted creativity, that it's not a flash of inspiration, but it's insights that over time you put together like a sculptor. And that is exactly how I put together my book, was I put them together over time. That was kind of a download and then putting them together. But now I'm in this place that is exactly talking about what that is here, which is putting them together like a sculptor, right? So I could say, oh, this is my silly hobby. But I can also say this is exactly what they're saying in this book about bipolar and creativity and the way to go about it. So, yeah. Right? So I could say, oops. So I could say, oh, this is a silly idea, or I could say, well, now I'm going to get into my sculpted creativity. And I was already doing that anyway. So this is just sharing, trying to figure out the next way to go about it. And part of the reason is that I created several different projects over these last 4 years. I wrote the book, I did a presentation, so like presentation slides, and created stuff regarding re-uncovery as a process. And so this is sort of the process of re-uncovery at this point where there's a lot to re-uncover. I uncovered certain insights in mania, and now I'm going to go back and re-uncover them and figure out what to do with them as a hobby, like collecting paint colors for cars. So because it's a hobby, I'll probably do this whenever I feel like it. And yeah, so that's kind of what it is. But here is, I could say, oh, this is like confirmation bias, but they're trying to say like how to do this, like not going into a big wave of it and disregarding all other parts of life, and then kind of getting angry because nobody else is going at that speed or operating in that way or can understand anything that that person is experiencing. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. And in these notes, like I haven't edited these notes, so some of them have like notes to self, which is like this sort of meta commentary. So what I was trying to do was sort of figure out how to go about this process. Because before, when I had different projects, whether it was the book and I gave myself a deadline, or whether it was the presentation, which had a definite deadline, I was able to use Parkinson's law to really utilize all the time I had before that in order to complete the project. So I spent quite a long time on the slides, but I learned a lot, so I wanted to do that. And now I'm like, well, how do I do this? I have, when I say I have a lot, this whole thing is full, like I have probably 1 million words. And so I was thinking about do this screen recording thing. Now that I'm in depression and I can look at the information and not just have it expand. Like if I was in a hypomania or something, it would create more insights and I'd be typing more, and maybe that's a good time to type some things or write. But right now, it's like, now I'm looking at the artifacts of when I had energy. Whether it was hypomania or mania, I wouldn't think it would be full mania because I was working, I was doing everything. I wasn't missing out on anything. So not even sleep. So now that I'm in this position, able to look at it, I was like wanting to find bits to talk to ChatGPT about, including I have like a bunch of papers I annotated. So that could be a lot easier one day when I can literally have a conversation with ChatGPT about the annotations I made in a paper that it will be able to read. So that is actually going to be really fun. So all that research I did, reading a ton of different papers about bipolar and creativity, that will come in easy, or that will come in handy as a project when I get there, right? And yeah, so I would need to upgrade to the ChatGPT again for that. And then, I wanted to get back into having a dialogue as well as some kind of humor. So with the humor, what I'm saying is if there's anything that's kind of funny, I'd probably want to pick that out and put it aside, or anything I can make a joke about. But that hasn't really been a huge topic. When I talked about re-uncovery, it talks about in the first part is, just documenting everything down, which is basically what my computer is. And then the next part, which I have done, but now I'm going to do it again from a different level of a bunch of completed projects, is the categories for some of the information, right? So like basically my notes app is like a ledger of everything that's come through. Not every single thing, but a lot. And then the different types of categories that I was looking to harvest before is different than now. So if there's anything that might be a movie script, that I would put aside as well. Or, not all of it. Some of it I might just talk about it. And basically movie scripts for me is like future possibilities. So when I have a future possibility, I think about it in terms of writing a movie script. Not because I'll for sure write one, but with ChatGPT I might be able to, or I can try and do it by myself if I want to. But it's a challenge because I don't know about the whole dialogue, creating the dialogue of the movie. So anyway, just grabbing those bits or just talking about them. Talking about them is kind of fun, right? It's like talking about prophecy. But it's not even prophecy really. It's more like, oh wow, look how this might play out. It's like when sometimes, when we have a conversation, we'll say something and then someone makes a funny joke out of what we said or says something surprising, right? So it's kind of like that. It's like having the insight and then seeing that the insight in retrospect by doing re-uncovery, seeing that it could be a scenario or a scene or part of a scene in a movie, right? Or it could be part of a scene in real life in other dimensions. Who knows? Doesn't matter really. And then also bits that could be poems or spoken word or slam poetry. So some of those could be fun. I did write out 2 of those, and they're of a certain kind. And I will say that I did try to see if ChatGPT could write like my slam poetry, and it couldn't. So I definitely beat it at that game. Not that we're counting or taking whatever. Keeping score. Yes. See, my brain is working, but not 100% yet because I'm still not fully out of the depression. And part of that, what's interesting to me is how I'm still in depression in some ways, like energy-wise, and just starting to come out of it. Yet I'm already able and wanting to get back to my hobby of looking at this information. It's sort of like, waiting till how we wait till we're not sick anymore so we can go to like the ice cream store, and then it's so cool, right? So this is the same way. It's like, oh, I want to get back to this. And maybe you have that feeling too about what it is that you create. And the point of this is also just to see if we can feel that it's what we feel is meaningful and significant that comes through us is meaningful and significant. And there's another project here. I created this Trumanic show thing, and doing the timestamps is like, okay, this is something I can do when I don't have any energy. But I haven't worked on that in months. And then this is the thing that I want to do, I think, which is basically create a big, long document with a lot of the content and train an AI on it as myself, right? Now, one thing that I can think of with this is if I haven't really, like a lot of this stuff I've written down, but I haven't said it out loud. Now, if I think something and I'm the first to think that in my own brain, like, oh, and that never came to mind before, and then I speak it out, I'm speaking a new thought. Whether it's new for someone else or not, I don't know. But I think writing it down is one thing, speaking it out is another. So part of it is to kind of first speak them out. Now, again, this is sort of like a collecting paint paint color numbers and stuff thing. So somebody might get joy speaking out the value of the paint color, you know, F, small f, blah, blah, 0, whatever. Now, this is another thing that, you know, I realized that each time one of these ideas came into my mind, or bits of meaning or memes, then it was like a little bit of dopamine, right? So somehow this arose in my mind, the exact process, I'm not sure. And then, you know, my brain gets some dopamine. Maybe my brain also gets some dopamine from writing them down. You know, maybe if I don't write them down, I don't get a little bit extra. But I think it actually, for me, it helps with modulating the dopamine. Of course, I don't have a study on this, or I can't look in my brain and see what's happening. But when I write it down, I know I can let it go. I can like 100% let it go. And because I've documented it. And if I didn't write it down, I might like, it might almost like expand upon itself. Or, you know, I created this word or this term. There's well, we all know FOMO, fear of missing out. And so for me, it's more like FOME, fear of missing in, fear of missing out on my inner insights. And in my experience, I don't really, I don't see images in my mind so much, like very rarely. I can barely conjure up a visualization in my mind. And a lot of the world is like, picture this. It's like, I can't. But I think that's one of the reasons why I'm more drawn to language and words, or words are more drawn to me. And I basically have FOME, fear of missing in. So by writing it down, I no longer have to fear it, because now it's on the outside and it's manifested, right? So I could have a little dopamine shot in my brain and have the insight, or I could have maybe even just the same dopamine inside my brain, write it on a piece of paper, and now I actually have an artifact of that. And again, it's like collecting paint colors. For some reason, it's fun. And I think it's been helpful for me, because in the very first mania I had, I wrote stuff down for sure, but I also was out and about talking with people. And that can get, it can really amplify everything, because then all of a sudden, you know, it's easy to just jump on a plane and go to the other side of the world, right? I didn't do that yet. But so I've created it more as this inner process and experience, rather than waiting for this energy to go out and kind of share it with people, or give it to people, or bounce it off people, or experience it with people, whether or not they experience what I'm experiencing. I've made it more of this inner thing, because I don't know exactly. I think it's just a lot easier. It doesn't get out of hand as much. And yeah, I forget what I was talking about. So anyways, basically having a kind of raw data set of some of the information. And the reason for that, we're going to see, is like we can basically train or upload knowledge documents into ChatGPT or whatever. And I'm sure that process will evolve over time. And then, like, imagine I have all these insights in the document, I can talk to them. And rather than having to like search the whole long document of like 1 million words, I can just talk to the document. and talk to the ChatGPT. So, another level of this, and sometimes when I speak on this level, it's like, okay, that's kind of like, I don't know what you would call it. Some people might call it like a little grandiose. I don't think it's grandiose. I think it's more like seeing the possibility of how this might be needed in the future, right? So it's sort of like saying, oh, I think I know something. But it's not really like that. It's not really like that or grandiose, because basically it's just like anybody in business who recognizes an opportunity. Like I was reading a book lately called The Luck Mindset, and the author was talking about how he thought of the idea of going to buy some of the domain names and .coms of big businesses that had not yet done that because it was so new, but he didn't, right? So this is sort of the thing I'm thinking myself is like, now imagine I have this huge amount of words that came to me over the years, but I don't want it stored in my brain. It's not stored in my brain. Anyway, it's stored in my computer. And that's why there's so much of it, is because I don't try to store more information in my brain. I let it come through my brain. So anyways, now all of a sudden, if it's in a big long document, then I can talk with it. And basically that consciousness, whether that's my consciousness or what have you, can be drawn upon. And that's kind of an interesting scenario or experiment for me. I already did that because I uploaded some of the books I wrote into it. And that's when it was not this new version, and it was quite good. So I think with even the newer versions, if I did that, it would be very good, because I was using ChatGPT a little bit, the free version, which gives you very limited time or prompts access to the best model, as I'm aware. And I was surprised that it remembered stuff that we were talking about in a different conversation box. So I thought that was quite cool, right? So it's basically, as I speak with it, becoming more and more attuned to me. And now there's a lot of the data missing because I have it in my computer, but it's not in ChatGPT. Now I did watch a video about AI when I was in depression, and they were talking about how in January they're going to be releasing something called agents, that basically the AI can go into your computer, whether it's like through the integrated cloud service, like connecting Google Docs or Microsoft Cloud or whatever, or whether it's actually in your computer, and do tasks for you. So basically, you could say, can you create 50 tweets or what have you? And it'll do that. Now you can already do that, but it'll be different when it's basically like putting all this stuff in the AI's knowledge base without having to put it in. So my exercise in trying to create this whole long list of this information may not really be necessary, in that I could just get everything into whatever it is types of documents that the AI will be able to understand and go from there. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but if that's available in a couple of months, or whether it's available to everyone, I'm not sure. But when it is available to everyone, in the meantime, I still want to kind of look at some of what is here and start on it and go from there. Because this is the beginning of being like, I want to create with ChatGPT. There's a few reasons, and one of the reasons is there's going to be so many people creating with ChatGPT that don't have bipolar disorder, and there's less people with bipolar disorder. So I feel like by interacting with it, it will get to know that side of people, Whereas if people who are, oppressed and marginalized don't talk to it, then maybe the true voice and individual voices won't really be part of it. And something I noticed when I was speaking with it is like, I've asked stuff about bipolar before, and it's like, we can't answer you on this topic, blah, blah, like it's against our rules of this and that. And then that's one of the reasons why I was playing around with creating the custom GPT with my books. So it would be able to speak with me on positive aspects of bipolar disorder. And I even did a little experiment where I convinced it to see that talking about the positives is important by referencing a paper that spoke about that. Then like that was kind of cool, right? But what I noticed when I was using it, and I haven't been using it in a long time, and I'm not on the paid version where you can have your own custom GPT, so my custom GPT is sort of in this limbo mode right now. It never questioned anything related to speaking about bipolar disorder, and it was more than happy to just speak in positive terms about it, and totally like gets it already. So I don't know what that's about, and I'm not saying that, oh, it's from me talking. I'm not saying that at all. It's just like, it's an example of making sure that that is also represented. And for me, I wish to try to connect the positive aspects to the human potential movement and growth, like conscious growth, and say neurodiversity or being diverse in consciousness, and seeing how important that is, especially now in this age of AI, because diversity in consciousness might actually, in the age of AI, when it's really integrated into a lot of things, might be the main advantage. Because the AI, I don't think that it's going to care what we look like. It's going to care what we think like. And if we think different than the masses of humanity, because that's what it is being trained on. It's being trained on mainly, kind of like the mainstream thinking types of people. And there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like it actually invites more people to start thinking differently, thinking with, divergent thinking and all those different thinking types that we have as humans. And we even have more thinking types, like metaphorically thinking type, and that voice that we talked about earlier with the myth of mental illness. That is a thinking type. But we don't think of it as a thinking type because we don't need to think that way. But in the age of AI, if we only think like the AI, we're going to be redundant, right? And so if we think something else than that, then that is going to be interesting to ourselves. It's going to be interesting to the AI, and the AI is not going to be interested in like repetition, because that in a way takes up computation, right? So anyways, lots of different points there. And again, when I speak about that, I really don't know what's going to happen. But what I do see is that a bipolar consciousness or other neurodiverse consciousnesses may have an advantage. So it's important to start at least playing around with it. I know that Apple already has a thing where you can like integrate it into your operating system, and I haven't done that. So I'm doing this cautiously and curiously. But the thing that impresses me the most right now so far is that the AI seems to really get it. So I can put in a bit of information that came through my mind or consciousness, and it will say the next thing that my mind was thinking anyway, and I just don't know how to like say it, or I just almost feel too lazy to fill it out. And now in a way it's good because I have something else that can do that for me. And I don't have to spend the cognitive load on that because, in the last mania, I was doing a lot of different things, and I spent myself just with doing that. So how am I going to do all this other stuff? And I know I was talking about sort of a list thing where it's like, okay, the next important part about starting to use AI. And I think there's a lot of reasons. I'm not the only one to say that. There's people out there that say that it's important to be using it and starting to get the hang of it. But the thing that I noticed, one thing I noticed the other day, I was trying to, or something came up on my YouTube feed about researching prompts for ChatGPT. And the prompts for ChatGPT and the use cases are nothing like I use it for. And so I think the way I use it is, it's interesting for me, and it would be cool if it becomes interesting for other people too. Because I think it's sort of like a dialogue, like having a dialogical experience with the ChatGPT. And basically each point that I've written down can be something to have a dialogue about. Now, a lot of it, maybe not, but that's okay. And also by organizing this data set of information, I might be able to say, write a book, write tweets, whatever, of this voice that's coming through, right? This voice that has been raised in my mind. That's not really a sound, but it's like saying something, right? It's some kind of meaning that I decided to capture. And yeah, also this could also be used to train other people's AIs if they wanted, right? Or encourage other people to create their corpus if they've written down a lot of different things. I also have an overhead camera that I'm going to do talking about some of the sticky notes at some point, I think. And this is another thing. One of the reasons I'm doing the screen record might seem kind of weird, but a while ago, when I had a bit of a premonition about something or a vision of something that might come into play, is that one day we might have to prove that we did some kind of work, prove the work, whether it's at a job or whether it is, and this already happens at jobs. Apparently, some companies, they know like the finger strokes on the keyboard, and or like maybe even if one is looking at the screen, I don't even know. But basically monitoring to make sure people are actually working with the time they're getting paid for. Now, imagine one day we don't have to work as much, maybe because of AI, I don't know. But not only that, because there's so much that can be easily generated by AI, that if one does generate some kind of text or image or video or something, they almost have to attach the link of them creating it. Because otherwise, we won't know. Like, we can still tell what's AI for now, for some things, not everything. So in my mind, it's not about as much being able to tell if something's AI. It's more, if I want to bring that back to my circle of influence or my personal responsibility, I would say I would prove that I did some kind of work. So I created a short about that on YouTube, about how that might look like. But this is also another version of that. And who are we going to prove that we did work to? Not humans necessarily. It's going to be the AI, right? It would likely be AI. First humans using AI, and then possibly AI itself. So yeah, that was a bit of my blurb that I wrote out when I was starting to think, like, how do I want to do this process? And I can tell you so far that I do like speaking more than writing. It's, yeah, I like it better. So that's part of the test. I'm experimenting here myself. And, you know, what I realized with writing is like it's very hard to reduce it down, right? It's hard for me to reduce things down. And I'm basically a hoarder of these insights and information. I've been hoarding them. And my brain works in an expansionism way, meaning most of the time if I read something, it sees something subtle from that, or reads between the lines, or fills in the blanks, or things like that. So then it's hard for me to like find like the point, or the this or the that. Like for me, the point is to be able to speak or experience from this place of not knowing, or I'm not sure, but for me, like when I think about the way my mind and consciousness and brain works now, my memory is really not very good, but I don't really see that as a problem, especially as my memory has gotten worse. My ability to channel these insights has gotten better, maybe to a fault where I have too much of it. And at the same time, that's okay too, because now there's these AI tools that's like, okay, I've been writing stuff down for like 8 to 10 years, and all of a sudden there's a tool that can make sense of it. It's kind of funny, right? Now the system would say, oh, it's all illness, it's all whatever. When it's like, no, these are like bits of creativity to me. So again, this data set for ChatGPT and a corpus for humans. One of my ideas was to put a lot of it in a document and be like, this is for analysis, for research on bipolar, because I did read somebody's PhD dissertation, and they actually did research on somebody's notebooks who had a diagnosis of bipolar, or has, I don't know when that was from, and they noticed certain things. And it's really long, but you know, somebody out there was interested in what a bipolar person would write down in different states. So that's another thing, you know, that it could be something like that. So I don't know what time we're on for this. Oh, we're like at an hour. That's a long time. We didn't get through that much, but that's okay. We will talk more about it quite soon. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope that this was easy listening. Take care.